Well, it does bother me when I look out on the congregation and we have what we might call a low Sunday, when there's a number of people who haven't come.
Gloria in excelsis Deo.
Well, I actually was called to the ministry when I was a teenager, and a lot of people affirmed that call and believed that I was called to the ministry, and I've been a minister now for over 30 years. Here we've pretty much maintained attendance, but it hasn't been there hasn't been any significant increase in attendance. But there's been a change in the United States. People don't see the Sunday morning worship as being the only time that you can worship or have a relationship with God. I think it has to do in part the nature of, in America, of the way Americans see spirituality. Something like 90% of Americans or more claim to believe in a God. Most Americans will say that they're spiritual, that they have a certain sense of spirituality about them and are interested in the spiritual. But I think that the decrease in church attendance has been more because there's a transition happening in denominations now. So I would look across the denominations. In the United States, there has been a significant decrease in the number of people attending church. As a matter of fact, many people who don't attend church regularly or aren't part of a denomination don't see a significant difference between Methodist or Presbyterian or Baptist or Episcopalian. A lot of people who don't go to church don't know what happens in the church walls. And so the denominations have struggled with this because it's difficult for an organization that's been set in its ways for so many years to change. There's a different need in our country for how people relate to God. And I'm not saying that the churches are failing in that, but they're very slow in changing and in figuring out what people need. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're struggling so, is because for generations we've seen this is the way you do church. And it's no longer the way many people in the United States see how you do church. All churches have seen a decline in the last 30 years. And I think people in the United States most people have come to a decision that you don't have to be Presbyterian or Methodist or Baptist to have a relationship with God. Unfortunately, I think that in the United States, because we have such a multiplicity of different religions, people shop around and a lot of people make up their own faith. Many of the mega churches feed into this sense of general spirituality. I know one large church that has a senior pastor plus a half a dozen assistant pastors, associate pastors, and the senior pastor only does funerals for some of the wealthiest or the longest members of the church. If you join the church and hadn't been there very long, you may not meet the senior pastor except occasionally. I'm not saying that denominations and smaller churches are the only way to go, but major churches, mega churches, have their own problems too. And I don't think it's really the solution in the United States, because people want to do hands-on ministry. They want to know that their discipleship makes a difference. Because I've had many people join the church here or my other churches that I've served and said that they don't like large churches because they're lost in them. They would feel, they like the family feel. They like where they can get to know one another and other people, where they really count and they can get involved. People want to know that they belong, that they're loved and cared for, and they want to be involved in loving and caring for others. And the church that can do that effectively is the church that not only draws members, but keeps members. And so I think that there will be. I pray for another great awakening in the United States, but not simply so that we'll get more people in the pews on Sunday morning. That's not what it's about. Yes, Sunday morning having more people would be a wonderful positive thing for us. But it's also getting people involved and bringing people to a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Them knowing that they are loved by God and that they belong to God and they're part of God's family, whether they call the family United Methodist or Presbyterian or Baptist or anything else. And I believe that that's happening. I see it happening all over the place today.